Welcome, everybody, to the Lion and Stag podcast. My name is Jad Cato, and I'm joined here with my friend Diego. How you doing?
Hi, I'm Diego.
And we're here to talk to you about fantasy, specifically a book series called The Wheel of Time, with written by Robert Jordan. And thank you so much for joining us. How you feeling about this, Diego? We're doing
Oh,
a
I'm
podcast.
I'm super excited about it. Ever since you told me about the new series that's gonna happen, I I have jumped full on into this series, and I'm getting pretty far into it. So, and I really like it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, for joining us. We are hosted by theworkprint.com, which is a great website that does a lot of pop culture reviews, whether it's movie, books, or comics and TV shows. And you can also listen to and watch our podcast on our YouTube channel. So please hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. We would love the support so we can grow and be able to, have some great discourse over some fantasy that we like.
Yep.
So Diego and I decided to tackle the Wheel of Time series, which for a lot of you fantasy readers probably know that is a bit of a book marriage,
Yep.
spanning about 15 books or so. So we're happy to do this and such. Diego, um, why don't you tell us? We didn't want to summarize really this
Yeah.
book because we want you guys to go out and check it out and read it. It's a lot of fun. But why don't you give us a really quick kind of summary of what happens with book one
Yes.
of the Lion and not of the Lion and Stag,
Yes.
with book one of the Wheel of Time, the Eye of the World.
Yeah, so we find ourselves in this very picturesque village in this part of this world, um, which you find out is part of a larger country called Andor. And so it's in a town called Emmett's Field and a region called the Two Rivers. So imagine it's basically like New Brunswick, except a lot prettier in the state of New Jersey. So, and
Not the
then
Canadian province.
not the Canadian exactly, not to be confused with our friends up north. But inside this village, there is a group of friends that have been living together their entire life, obviously, because they're friends. And they meet a mysterious traveler who turns out to be the not witch, but a magic wielder. They're called Aes Sedai, which in the language is in the old tongue, it actually means servant of man. Or hi, Diego here in editing. Just wanted to let folks know that Aes Sedai in the old tongue actually means servant of all, not servant of man. I just wanted to make sure that I said that out loud before anybody comes at us in the comments. Thank you. Or something like this. If they the woman is named Maureen, and this person is kind of guiding them through this whole new thing that's going on. And so they she decided to take Matt Cowdrum. I'm not going to say all their names because I'm going to probably butcher them. Matt Randall Tor, Perrin, and Egwene and Egwene. So these four decide to go off to a little town called Tar Valon, which is like the seat of Aes Sedai power. But in between that, a lot of shenanigans happen. And they're also joined by Maureen's ultra cool Giga Chad, before was Chad, Warder. Is sort of like a bodyguard, but they're a lot closer. They're like magically bonded. We can get into that later. But there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. There's a lot of twists and turns, and they find out that they are what they're called Teverine, which means that they can actually change events to their will. Because, as you know, the wheel wills as the wheel weaves, or the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. And so you're constantly seeing this like interesting dynamic. So they end up being separated because they get attacked by these Trollocs and all this other really bad stuff. And then all of a sudden they're in this part of the world called the Blight, where that's where kind of like all the bad things are, and like there's nothing growing anymore and everything like this. To go to The Eye of the World. And so the Eye of the World, I'm not going to spoil it, so we're just going to leave it at that. And you need to read the rest of this book because this book has everything that a fantasy lover will like. It has everything from battles to intrigue to really diverse characters that I must admit the names kind of have your eyes roll to the back of your head, but
Mm.
it's so rich. And you know, Jad and I have been talking about this for a long time, and this is one of the few book series where I've never or I didn't feel like chapters were not really necessary. So like if you are a fan of Game of Thrones, and we'll get into this later, I don't want to bogart this, but like you're like into Game of Thrones, you do realize like some chapters don't really need to be there, and you feel like, yeah, I really don't care what Cersei's eating for breakfast, that she's, drinking it with too much wine or whatever. Like, I know that that's part of the whole thing, but sometimes it gets a little over the top when you're reading 10,000 pages. So, but yeah, so that's my little, really badly summarized, but you need to read this book.
So yeah, if you're just getting into fantasy, this is a great series to start with. As I said, it does span around 15 books or so.
Mm,
The author had actually died um, around book 12 or book 13 or something
yeah.
like that. And I'm sure we'll get corrected in the comments on which one specifically. So it was finished up by another really awesome fantasy author named Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson. Yeah.
And a fun story about that, the reason why he got to finish the series was because he wrote either the obituary or the homily for Robert Jordan's funeral, and his wife was like so taken aback by how much passion this guy had that she was like, "This is the guy that's got to finish the series."
Oh wow, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I started like searching about the author, and then I
Yeah,
found out.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's really I just found out right now. It's
right?
excellent.
Fun fact.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also worth reading if you're a fan of speculative fiction in general. Personally, I'm very into horror and sci-fi, so I am not as well read within the fantasy genre within spec fic. So being able to do this podcast with you, Diego, of course, and through the
Thank
work
you.
print gives me an opportunity to really check out this classic series and to analyze it, which is what we want to do rather than kind of summarize everything going on. So Diego, do you want to talk a little bit about the differences between the Wheel of Time, specifically The Eye in the World, and of course A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. Martin?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I feel that, oh, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there are a lot of things that they hit the same notes, especially when it comes to like the intrigue. Like they have in this book, like the game of houses, which is basically like their version of like Game of Thrones, where people are like politically intriguing and big families and all this other stuff. So that's part of it. Also, like it's not, but one of the good things about this series, it's not so grim dark, right? Where there is no hope. And so one of the great things about this book in particular is that you, even though things seem bad, it doesn't leave you like, oh my God, like you're gonna slit your wrist after the fact. I know that sounds kind of gross and I don't mean to make light of that, but there are times where you read certain authors or certain genres where it's very dark and there is no hope in that. Robert Jordan does a really good job in making sure that you're really invested and that there's hope in that investment, and then the investment pays dividends, to use the parlance of the profession. Where George R. R. Martin is a great author and is an amazing storyteller and world builder, but there are times where you're just kind of like sapped of all energy when reading that. And I'm a fan of the series, so don't think I'm just like punching down on George R. R. Martin. I mean, the guy is laughing the way to the bank. Clearly, he's doing something right. I just feel that there are times where it's too dark, right? but also part of that was what he wanted to do. Where, like, my favorite character in Game of Thrones is Ned Stark, but Ned Stark is a bit of an idiot. And Ned Stark did a lot of great things, which was the right thing to do, but it didn't do anything for him because it's not a story. You know what I mean? It's not a, he's not the white knight that's going to save the damsel in distress. He ended up costing him his own life. Spoiler alert. You know what I mean? So in that regard, I really like how this series is, or how this series started. I mean, I'm a little further into the series right now, and it's only getting better. So we're not going to talk more about that.
Excellent. Yeah.
End scene.
End scene. I think a big difference that readers will notice if you're new to the series, of course, too, is that Martin tends to focus more on kind of like the interpersonal politics of
Mm,
these different peoples, kind of showcasing, how you can't really, trust everyone. Everyone has a different agenda and such, like, you know, type of attitudes, right? That would either like further or hinder an agenda, right? Very much basing it off the War of the Roses and such, where Jordan is looking at it more, I think, in a systematic way, right? Kind of shifting from that. There's something way bigger at play, obviously the wheel. And there are also different creatures and societies and interactions that will, kind of play a pertinent part of the story
mm.
and affect different characters and such. And we can see that with the characters of Nynaeve and Perrin, when they kind of get paired off, they get separated from the group at one point, and then they get to meet some really awesome travelers, who are kind of very nature oriented, living kind of like a hidden area within the forest, and they get to like kind of travel around, very like nomadic
Yeah.
in that sense too. And they do it for kind of the different wars that are occurring. Well, I think they do it because that's what they're meant to do,
Yeah.
but it's takes place within the backdrop of a land that's going to be soon turmoiled by war. It takes place within the backdrop, of an area that is in war with the rise of the false dragon Logain and how he gets captured and such. So being able to see that systematic interaction and how it plays within the storyline, I think is a really big difference also within that of, A Song of Ice and Fire in that series, especially the first book, right? As you kind of mentioned, very heavily focused on, like Ned Stark is a big character with a really nice twist there of him getting, kind of killed. It's the biggest thing I see with it is that A Song of Ice and Fire focuses a lot more on actions and consequences, where this book series here, The Wheel of Time, seems to be like, well, there's kind of a predestination type of situation,
Yes.
that the physics or the magic system within this world is going to adjust or cause occurrences, you know what I mean, that will lead these characters either to their fate or to react in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I did want to talk about, because I defer to your expertise on this, is uh, the role of Tolkien in how this series is kind of starts off, or at
Mhm.
least in how this book starts off. As we would be uh very bad at talking about fantasy if we didn't mention like the godfather of modern fantasy, right? I mean, in many ways, Tolkien cast a very big shadow, whether you like it or not. And I think that Jordan does a really good job of using like, I don't know, like, I think that there's definitely some
Mhm.
Tolkien influence, but I feel like it's not derivative. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe.
No, sure. No, I think you said it well, right? It's this idea that a lot of tropes were established from Tolkien. Of course, he's basing it off of different mythologies and such, and not just from England, but other parts of Europe too. Um, there are some Middle Eastern influences, which is what we do see, or rather Near Eastern influences, which is what we do see within the Wheel of Time, kind of a fusion of East meets West.
Yes.
We can see it in the name, for example, as like Rand al'Thor, or like Lan, who's really Alain or Alen.
Mhm.
Kind of that Semitic guttural sounds appearing within there, right?
Hmm.
So you're of course going to find influences of Tolkien, whether you're reading that type of fantasy, right? Because he was writing and he was extremely popular within that, and kind of helped establish or create tropes that do reappear from that. What's nice about this series, for example, right? And this is something I struggled with when I was reading The Sword of Shannara, the first book, um, was that he writes it in a very like original way. He's presenting it in a way that's new and refreshing. Um, not completely. Of course, there are some similarities, right? This idea of the young white male, I guess, who is going to be the hero, like in that sense. But he does keep it fresh by adding a lot more characteristics, I think, that
Yeah.
Tolkien didn't do. And of course, it's a different message, right? There's different ideas kind of being played around with it. Um, Different fantastical elements, but yeah, you are going to see a lot of similarities, and we can point them out
Yeah.
as time goes on, of course, too, as I'm sure everyone will. But yeah, that's just very common, in
Yeah.
every genre. I spy thriller, and someone can be like, oh, this takes a little bit from James Bond or the Bourne Identity series, and
Yeah.
well, yeah, right, because they've
Yeah.
been so influential in in society in this genre, specifically, like with fantasy. You're going to get a lot of similarities with that, right?
Yeah. And I think it's, oh, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Chad. Were you, oh,
Was it?
um, there's a big difference between using the ideas and then just, doing what I like to call elf puke, which is just like bad, bad fantasy writing, which is just ripping off.
Hashtag elf peak.
Hashtag elf puke. I don't think I can't credit making that word. I think I read it off the repository of all human knowledge, Urban Dictionary. So, but it is something to be said, right? But like one of the things that I love about this that is like when you start reading this book, you definitely get like a very Lord of the Ringsy vibe on how he describes like Emmett's Field and the two rivers. And it's like
Mm.
super picturesque and amazing. And these people are just super cool and just living their best life as farmers and not destroying the land around them, but just living as one should be with nature, you
Yeah.
know. And I remember telling that to Jad. I was like, yo, dude, like I feel like this, I'm getting a little like, okay, like what's going on? And then all of a sudden, like it goes into a really cool direction, and you're like, yeah, this is why I'm here, right? Like I'm here for it. Excuse me. I know one of the things that we did want to also talk about was the magic system.
Yeah, magic system and the environmental kind of
Yeah.
undertones within it. Why don't you get into the magic system, since we've
Oh,
already kind of been alluding to it?
oh, for sure. So the magic system here is really cool because it's two types of there's channelers, which are basically magic wielders. And so in this series, there used to be male channelers and now the female channelers. But because male channelers ended up going mad, and I like to use that term in quotation marks because you want to be sensitive to mental health, but they get tainted by the power of the one source, and then bad things happen. And so now there's an entire set of Aes Sedai that their whole deal is killing men who can channel. And so you'll in the Aes Sedai core, I guess, there are different types of Aes Sedai. I'm not going to get into that because you don't really find out more about that in this book. So in this though, they can channel, and it's kind of like they can deplete themselves, so they can actually, you can't be using the magic whenever you feel like. You can't just lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. You have to recover because there's a cost to the magic. There's a cost to channeling. And I think it's something that I actually really like about this book is the fact that there's an actual you there's risk in using this really powerful thing, and it's so great to see how, magic is treated with respect, right? Because like a lot of times fantasy authors can fall into this trap where, they could just magic anything and there's no cost to it. So there's really no, what's the word I'm looking for, Jad? Um, there is no like you don't feel like there's anything at stake because they could just wield magic. So, they can't be in any real trouble because they can wield magic whenever they want. And so here you can't really do that. And there's some real cost to it. So that's one of the things I really like it. Do you?
Yeah, totally. There's a big physical cost, as we see with the character of Moiraine, throughout the story, and the lengths that she has to go to in order to, protect Rand, Matt, Perrin, and Nynaeve, as well as a couple of other characters too. Um, so, yeah, the magic system is very interesting in that sense. There seems to be kind of like an overarching physics that exists within this world, that's very much centered within, or centered rather around the wheel, right? And we know that there's a time jump that occurs within the book from the first chapter to the second chapter, indicating that there's, almost like a reincarnation of this binary fight between good and evil. So that's why I kind of use the word physics in that regard. There's also different levels to the magic users too, right? So, the wisdoms are, I think, at least in this book, Nynaeve is, implied to use maybe some sort of, a supernatural or like normal type of methods to be the wisdom in terms of healing and stuff. So I don't know if she's necessarily using magic. She's definitely sensitive to it and has, I guess a lot of strength and power, kind of, having a lot of midichlorians, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, there's of course the Aes Sedai, but they're also divided into different groups. They're not necessarily a unified type of, mage group. Uh,
Guild.
yeah, like a guild. I think there are several different guilds. There are red and
Yeah.
blue Aes Sedai and such. But then you also have different creatures that are able to use magic too in different ways, right? So where an Aes Sedai, for example, can have healing, attack, and cover type of magic, right? To help in terms of survival. You can have other creatures that will use, magic such as manipulating the environment, if you will, which I think is a cool segue to get into our next point about the environmental undertones
Yeah.
that exist with it, so yeah, if you really like environmentalism, I hope you do.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah.
You know,
Kind of one
yeah,
planet to live in, right?
yeah, only one planet, one world, one planet. To quote the Falcon and Winter Soldier,
Yeah, there you go.
dating. We're just dating our podcast right now. But yeah, so there's really a lot of great environmental undertones within this. Of course, there's a geographic aspect into how things are laid out with an amazing map in the beginning, which you'll see posters of once the show comes out on Amazon, right? Prime. And, there's one really great character that appears near the end of the book. So essentially what happens, our group gets divided, part of them gets reunited. I think all of them actually get reunited,
Yeah.
except for the and Tom Maryland, who unfortunately dies. Spoilers. Bum bum bum. And yeah, so they end up going to this place called the Blight in order to get to the Eye of the World, which is the source of this magic that kind of dictates how everything functions in this world. And when they do that, they meet the Green Giant, who is the protector, or at least the gatekeeper to this different, or to this source of power, right?
Mhm.
And this Green Giant has the power to create life, essentially on Earth or on the Earth. He can make plants and trees grow wherever he is, keeps it in the same, I guess, like temp, controls the environment. So that's a different level of magic, as we can see, that an Aes Sedai can't do, for example, or at least it hasn't been indicated in the first book, that Moiraine can do anything like that, or anyone within her guild, or like that mage type of
Yeah.
person. So yeah, but the environmental undertones are really great. Of course, it gets threatened. we can see it in the difference in, as Diego mentioned, in the ordinary world, kind of the first act. You have Eamon's Field and the two rivers. It's very beautiful, lush, and lavish. It's very far away
Mm,
from a lot of the different things that are happening within the books, the wars with the, false dragon, Logain. They're definitely further removed from the different cities, right, which have less of a natural aspect to what is going on. And the furthest away that you get from that would be the Blight, right, which is the complete opposite, kind of this nuclear like wasteland that exists, that which the characters have to travel to in order to get that. And there's this idea that life with this green giant, who's close to the source of magic within this world, has that ability to let or allow life to regrow, right, or create life to be able to regrow in an area that has become so destitute. And I think that's a really nice allegory for how strong Mother Nature is, and how quickly it can heal and
yeah,
such, with hopefully good ideologies surrounding that.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and also you missed like one of my favorite side characters in this book is Elias,
Oh
wolf,
yes,
the wolf brother. And
walk with Elias.
yeah, my man Elias, who is, basically one with the wolf and like lives with in commune with wolves. Like he shares his fire with them, he hunts with them, they protect him, he protects them, and he's like one of the happiest people in there in the entire book. Like he is just living his life and having a grand old time. And you know he also acknowledges that Perrin is actually a wolf brother as well, which is really cool, and something that you know he was like, yeah, you should be proud of what you're able to do. And it's like it's a good message. And I think you know Elias is one of my, as I said, one of my favorite characters because of the fact that he's so sure of himself and knows that he is in the right path for himself, and is doesn't really care what other people think of him, because he's you know you learn further down he's got a really cool backstory. But he's a it's a he seems to me to be one of the most fully fleshed out characters in this, aside as a side character, obviously. And it's really cool to see how his commune with nature is really cool.
Indeed, yeah, he's like a warg too, right? If
Yeah,
we're gonna use a Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones terminology, right? He
yeah.
can connect to these wolves, communicate with them, and I really hope that they use the wrestler Elias from the WWE to play Elias in this
That
book,
would
just
be
solely
awesome.
based on the like in his wolf-like persona on
Yeah,
stage
exactly.
or in the ring, rather. Uh, turn that into a hashtag movement on Twitter. Go
Yeah,
for
there
it.
you go. Yeah, Elias
And
for Elias.
Elias for Elias, yeah.
So that's one thing that I definitely think that, you see, like, the happier people are is that the more commune with nature they are. Like the Tinkers, like you said before, like they are a band of nomads, and they eat. I think they're completely vegetarian. They're complete pacifists, so they
Mm.
don't even believe in defending themselves. Like they're such extreme pacifists, and so they don't want to make a mess of where they are. So that's also one of the things that you see, like their way of the leaf, right, which is how their guiding principle is one to be completely in tune with their surroundings. And I think that's also really cool. So
Definitely too. And we also get another thing, I guess, that plays a little bit into the environmental undertones too, is this idea of like different societies and species interacting with each other.
yep.
And yeah, you have the ogre Loyal, who's really in the story. He's this different species, kind of like an ogre-like monster that's not really um, you know, familiar. Well, everyone knows about him within the different towns and such like that, but no one has really seen these ogres, right? You have to be really well traveled or warder to kind of interact with them. But they don't really leave, their comments in a sense either, right? They kind of are separated in a different geography, and he decides to kind of come out and explore and see the trees. This idea that his people had planted trees, right,
Grove.
and planting them. Yeah, I think it was trees, right? And they built towns.
They built all the great architecture in this world was
Yeah,
created by ogres.
yeah, and yeah. So, did they create trees also
They created some of the groves for
for the
that
trees?
for the trees. So they did
Yeah,
something called steadings, and they're a fascinating culture where they created these things called steadings after the breaking of the world,
yeah,
and they have this thing called the longing. If they're too far away from a steading for too long, they end up dying because of the fact that they're away from their people for so long. And so,
yeah.
Loyal is such a good dude because he's sort of like Jad and I, just really into books and getting onto adventures and stuff. And he doesn't. They don't. It's just really. It's a really cool character.
Could he be Robert Jordan, a
Yeah.
stand-in for
Right.
Robert
Yeah.
Jordan? Let us know what you guys think. We're gonna leave you on that thought, actually.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments below
Mhm.
on what you think. Is Loyal, Robert Jordan, just in this world? Is it really an isekai that we're just leading? And yeah, and thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. The Eye of the World is an awesome book. We're very excited to review each book in the series. You can follow me at Jad Cato, JADKAADO, on all of the social medias. Jago, where can we find you?
You can find me either on Instagram at Cobra's Finest it's with a Z, or on my YouTube channel at Diego MT. That's the name of my channel. I don't have anything going on Facebook, but yeah,
Yeah,
follow me on Instagram. That's where all the good memes are anyway.
yeah, totally. Let me know what you all think and what you want to hear. Let us know your thoughts about the book and what you're excited to see about with the show coming
Yeah.
out eventually sometime.
Also, I would like to know if anybody has any ideas of what should we be looking forward to in the series. So if you've read the series, give us some of your favorite parts.
Excellent indeed. Well, signing off, I'm Jad,
I'm Diego.
and we are the Lion and the Stag.
Take care. Bye.